Welcome to Millennium Counseling Center's podcast, where each week we go in depth into all things mental health, addiction recovery, and being our healthiest and happiest self. Enjoy. This week's episode will be hosted by one of the many incredible therapists here at the Millennium Counseling Center. Please enjoy.
Hey everyone, welcome back to our Dating in Your 20s series. Lily and I had so much fun recording last week's episode and looking at, figuring out modern dating apps, social media, all the things. And one thing we kind of highlighted that I think we really want to focus on this week is what does it look like to prioritize mental health while dating?
100%. I think it's kind of something that we alluded to.
Yeah.
But I'm happy that we're spending a little bit more time on this specific topic.
Yeah. And I think, one thing that we kind of got into at last week's episode and towards the end of it, we were talking a lot about why dating in your 20s is uniquely challenging because you're in the midst of life transitions. There's a hint of self-discovery. There's career pressures. There's the comparison culture of looking at everyone else's life and what they're doing. And being in your 20s is such a subset of life that I feel like everyone thinks back
Trying to remind myself this.
Yeah, literally. But everyone looks back to it and they say oh, I loved my 20s. Or they're my 20s were terrible. And there's literally no medium where my 20s were just my 20s. And thinking about mixing and dating with all of that, how are we supposed to care for ourselves and for our minds and our bodies and just our overall wellness when dating can be so anxiety inducing?
I don't think it's a catch
22?
Catch 22 or maybe just all answer, a blanket statement on
yes, there we
how we can do that. If anyone has any tips, let us know.
Let me know.
But I think it's a lot. And again, I talked about this last week and I'm going to bring it up again. And I'm probably going to bring it up every single episode in this series. But there's a lot of conflicting advice that we hear.
Yes.
And I think, at least, and I'll speak from experience, this stresses me the F out.
Yeah. Yes.
Because I'm oh, maybe I shouldn't care. Ooh, maybe I should care. Or and it really just creates this overthinking bubble in my head. And I don't know if other people feel this way, would love to interact with our listeners to figure some things out. But I think it's just there's a lot of should and shouldn't, or what should affect you and what shouldn't affect you, that's where the anxiety and more mental health type stuff comes up for me.
Yes. And everyone thinks they're an expert. Anytime I go on social media, it's this is what you should wear on a first date. Or if you're going out to the bars with your friends, wear a hoodie or a sweatshirt because then you don't look like you're trying so hard. And then some people are oh, buy this new top that's selling really fast on Amazon.
Exactly.
And it's okay, wait, what am I supposed to wear? It's as simple as that, where I feel we're so in our heads and it's an added anxiety pressure. It makes me want to vomit.
No,
thinking
100%.
about it for too long. And I've even talked about it in my personal therapy where I was what's the right thing? Am I supposed to think of dating like a chess game where I'm thinking 10 steps ahead? Or am I supposed to go with the flow? My therapist was there is no right answer.
Exactly.
Well, that sucks.
It's the worst answer to hear,
right? Right? But that's probably something I would say to a client. So,
No, I completely agree. Just the conflicting sentiments. And then at the end of the day, and I say this about therapy, individual therapy too. And honestly, I also say this about sometimes when I go visit a psychic, I do that. Sometimes I'm a little woo-woo. But you can take whatever feels right for you. And I don't even know if I want to use the word right, but whatever is resonating for you.
Yeah.
If you're listening to a podcast or you're scrolling on TikTok or whatever. One day you want to wear the Amazon viral corset, if that's what you were talking about.
Yeah, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Or a hoodie to test out the hoodie theory. Go for it.
Yeah.
Check in with yourself. Have a conversation with yourself. I try to remind myself it's not that deep. Does that work? Sometimes. Sometimes it doesn't. But it's just, it can be a mixture of the two.
Yeah.
And themes of just it can be a both and some days whatever the not skinny but not fat podcast girl is going to tell you, that may feel good. Yeah. Or then maybe you're going to listen to Call Her Daddy and whatever Alex Cooper is saying to you, that may feel good too.
Yeah.
It does not have to be, I'm only going to ascribe to this one set of rules and these one strategies or these one whatever it may be.
Yeah. When it comes to like you personally dating, like I know we've talked about like being overwhelmed or anxiety, but like what's one thing that like really resonates with you, especially like being in your mid-20s and figuring it out?
Something that I think was in the past for me was definitely texting. But I feel like we can have that conversation in a few moments. But it's going on first dates.
Oh my God.
It is going on first dates. I can set up the date. I can get excited about the date. Honestly, I'm pretty good when I'm like getting ready, listening to some music, doing my hair, maybe like putting on some fun makeup or picking out my outfit. Like I'm good on that.
Yeah.
I recognize that all of that stuff also may cause some anxiety for some people, but for me, that works. It's legitimately walking into the restaurant, the bar, the whatever activity that we're doing. The split 2 to 3 minutes
before
when the Uber says 1 minute or your train stop is the next stop. Full blown sweat, panic, palms, heart. I don't even know, name anything, feeling like I'm going to throw up, nauseous, 1,000%. And then I'm obviously fine 5 minutes into it, like totally. Yeah. So I try to remind myself that it's just a moment in time that will pass. Like this too shall pass.
I'm the direct opposite because I don't have fun getting ready. Like doing my makeup takes me 18 tries. I try on 4 different outfits. I'm thinking so deeply about how I'm going to be perceived. And I think I look very internally. I'm questioning whether or not I should cancel because like if I'm this miserable preparing, is the date actually going to be fun? And I started thinking about it like a doctor's appointment. If I have a doctor's appointment on Friday, I'm thinking about it all week. And I'm like, they might have to take my blood. Like I need to remind them that this prescription needs a refill. Do I need to go ahead and call into this meeting because it might be like the doctor's appointment might go over? Like I'm thinking about all the different outcomes that it's consuming me. I get to the doctor's appointment. It's fine. Yep. It's maybe 20 minutes. Like, and I like making that comparison because I'm like walking up to the date. I'm like, well, nothing to lose now. Yep. Like in the Uber, okay, like I'm here, I'm going. And that's when I start to calm down. But it's like if I make plans with someone on Monday and we're going on a date on Thursday, those next 3 days, brutal.
See, that's so interesting because I don't think about it until right before.
Really? Like not at all?
Not really. No. It's more excitement until I'm like, it's here. Panic.
Yeah.
Panic.
I would be so interested to see, like, is it anxiety for some people? Is it like being overwhelmed? Is it like you kind of fall into like some OCD patterns of like having some like compulsive thoughts?
Totally.
Like,
no, I mean, I'm sure we could probably talk about this forever.
Yes. I feel like everyone experiences something different, but everyone experiences something that's probably can be perceived as negative leading up to dating.
And I mean, I love how you said can be perceived because then I'm thinking reframe, like what's the reframe?
Yeah.
I'm always like nerves means I'm excited or nerves mean that I care. Like this is showing that I'm interested in this person or maybe it's like I'm feeling like I'm ready. So I do care how this goes because I do want it to go well. And maybe when I mean, we can talk about this too, but like whatever your intention is for dating in that area of your life, I think sometimes it's a little bit easier for me to be like, it's just fun. Like, let's have fun, whatever. And I'm like, whether I believe that or not, who knows? And then the other half of it being like, oh no, I'm actually kind of feeling like I've taken some time. Like I'm ready for something more serious. And this is more of like an intentional looking for someone to maybe like grow with or whatever. And for me, those ones are obviously they're setting the stage a little bit higher, right?
Yeah.
Like those are a little bit more just like it's harder to then have a reframe around those dates.
Yes. I think that the general message of this podcast, especially this episode, is like dating will impact your mental health no matter what. Whether it's positive, negative, however you need to perceive it, whether it's your self-esteem, self-perception, kind of the things we talked about last week, the role of anxiety, depression, and other mental health challenges, and also navigating those when you're in a relationship, like having to explain and tell someone like, sorry, I have anxiety. Like that's so hard.
No, it is. It is. And I know that I was like questioning whether I wanted to go down this route when we were prepping for the podcast, but like, do I want to know if they're in therapy? 100%. Or if they've ever done it, or their opinions on it, or then throw in, I mean, now we're going, but like, I am a therapist. Like, you are going on a date with a therapist. Yes. No, I'm not going to psychoanalyze you. Am I psychoanalyzing myself?
Yes. Absolutely.
But no, I think what you said earlier rings true. It's going to have an impact. And I think one way to deal with it is to not even acknowledge that it's having an impact. Or you're like, why am I feeling like this? But it's because of maybe how you've been aligning likes on a dating app with your self-worth, or how you've been aligning the amount of time someone asks you for a second date, or I don't know, all of those like quantitative things that you can do, and then kind of attaching those to like who you are as a person, I think is a common theme that I see in my clients too.
I think being in your 20s is interesting because it's really easy to neglect your mental health because there's so many things that are moving and shifting and changing outside of your control that it's easy to be like, this is just life right now. I'll make it through the next 4 years. I'll be fine. And then you kind of like push yourself. That it's really easy to neglect your mental health when you insert dating. Some signs of that might be like feeling drained or overwhelmed by dating, constant overthinking, neglecting your own needs, chasing validation, sacrificing your time, your priorities. I mean, I hate like the conception of like red flags, but like ignoring red flags or trying to avoid being alone, using relationships as a distraction, comparing yourself to others. Like, it is so easy to be like, not thinking that that's your mental health, that's just like the world we live in.
I literally was just thinking that. Like, take a second and actually recognize that that is fully connected to your mental health.
I think I've done all of these in like the last, 10 days.
Yeah. I mean, I'm right there with you.
Yeah.
But I mean, and not to just be to normalize, but we say that to normalize. Like, I'm sure a lot of people are feeling this way. And I think it can be, and I talk about this in individual sessions too, but I think it can be really helpful sometimes, not all the time, but to like call something out and label something.
Yes.
So it's like, oh, like maybe I'm tired because I've been putting a lot of energy into that. Or like maybe this is having an effect on me that is connected to my mental health. Or maybe these, or I know I just said nerves and anxiety and and excitement, but or it's like, oh, maybe these nerves actually are anxiety, or this is a panic attack. I'm not getting like sweaty palms and I don't know, heart beating. Like, that is normal, but it's also like, it's almost not normal because like there's a word for that, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. It's such a fine line to balance too. And I think like there's a point where I feel like we've overanalyzed dating and we've also, like, it's a both and.
Yep.
And we've also oversimplified dating where we're like, it's okay to feel this way. Like, it's fine. You're just nervous before a date. But like, are you actually nervous because you don't really want to be around this person and like they make you nervous? And where's the fine line where you start figuring out, is it me or them? Or is it just the theme of dating?
No, 100%. And I'm hoping this isn't making our overthinking girlies even overthink anymore.
Overthink. We're right there with you.
But something that I do want to talk about that I think I see a ton in my clients is texting in an early stage relationship.
Yeah.
Maybe not relationship, situationship, going on dates.
However you want to define it.
However you would like to define it, I think mental health and texting are very much tied. More than I ever knew before.
Yes.
Especially when speaking with some of my younger clients.
Oh, my clients, men, women, everyone, their phones and having, I mean, like, we pride ourselves on like immediate satisfaction. Like, I can order something right now and it can be here to me by the end of the day. Like,
before that.
Yeah. We want that instant gratification. And we've been given that through media, social media, through our phones, through email, communication styles, that now we expect it almost when it comes to relationships. And it has become a really unhealthy, and like, I do it too. That's where I feel like we can be vulnerable on this podcast and be like, it's not just our clients. Like, this is something I've experienced as well. And that I feel like I'm confident in saying like 80%.
Yeah, totally. Totally. No, I guess, what are you seeing in your clients that would be worthwhile talking about a little bit too? I think for me, it's like kind of a little bit of maybe some anxious attachment styles in texting. And maybe that's because things that have happened in your past. In individual therapy, you definitely can talk about that, draw those connections. kind of provide a little bit more understanding and background of what you may be feeling. But for me, it's a lot of, I sent something and I haven't heard back in 2-3 hours, or sometimes it's even like, I haven't heard back in 30 minutes or 45 minutes. Again, that instant gratification.
Yeah.
But then that is, then it's talk about cognitive distortions. I'm jumping to, he doesn't like me, they don't like me, she doesn't like me.
Yeah.
And it's automatic, what am I doing?
Yes.
Like, do I deserve this? Constant doubt, constant mind reading, constant, name every other cognitive distortion that you know.
Yeah.
That's happening there. And I think in therapy, again, putting a label to something, I think it's been really helpful to share a list of cognitive distortions with people that may not be as aware. And then you're like, oh, I'm doing that thing. You know?
On the other end, I'm seeing, like, I love when my clients bring to me and they're like, please look at what he sent me or look at what she sent me. And they're like, how should I respond to this? And I'm noticing it's been like 2 days for them to respond, but it's because they wanted someone to be alongside them to like help them craft what to say. Because I also think we're so cautious of how we want to be perceived when there's multiple ways to read into things like you're talking about. And so I've had clients who will write down everything they want to say. I've had them send it to their friend group and be like, does this sound like an okay text? I've had them like really overanalyze it.
I've had people type it into ChatGPT.
Yes. Like think so heavily about how their text is going to come across that I'm like, why didn't you just pick up the phone and call someone? Like, and that's so easy for me to say, but like I would probably be doing the exact same thing.
Totally. I mean, and that's why I love that we have both of us on this podcast. And I'm sure if we had 3 other people on this podcast, they would have a different opinion and a different experience too. But I mean, oftentimes if you're able to step back and take on like a reflective hat of the situation, it's like, okay, I want to make sure that I send a text that doesn't allow the person receiving it to think anything but what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And I think that's a little bit about what you're talking about. Because you're probably thinking that way because you've been on the other side of receiving a text and you're like, what does this mean?
Yes.
Like, I need to read between every single line. Like,
or like they put a period here, but an exclamation mark here. Like, what does that mean?
Exactly.
What is their tone?
And then you have it doesn't mean anything, like whatever. And then you have, but like, they probably put it there 2 minutes something. You know, like you can constantly think about that. So I guess, what are some things that you share with clients as helpful tips in navigating some of the text angst?
I think like proactive things is put your phone on Do Not Disturb, especially if it's like you're waiting anxiously for someone to respond to you. Focus, or like we always, like people assume distractions are bad or like they have a negative connotation. Distractions can be good. Like go on a walk without your phone, go hang out with friends, go socialize, go to a yoga class, go do something where like your brain can have a minute from thinking about this because this is taking up a lot of brain space. And then like also just practice like mindfulness and self-compassion, whether that means journaling and like getting it out of your brain from like up here thinking about everything and just kind of like word vomiting everything you feel can sometimes just be such a release because you're no longer holding it inside. You've gotten it out. Or like, don't be afraid to express what you need. And that's hard. And that also depends like on the level of the relationship, the level of comfortability with another partner or person. But like if you feel like you need a text before bed, communicate that. And if they can't give you that, then like, hey, you just found out something that isn't working here.
So many things are coming up as I'm sitting here and listen. One, I want to acknowledge that getting up and like getting yourself to do that distraction is very, 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 very hard.
It's so hard.
Booking the yoga class, going for the walk. Our Chicago girlies and Chicago people listening, cold as heck outside.
It is so cold.
So that makes sense. But doing those things like in theory and on paper, or it's like, yes, that I know that there are benefits to that. And yes, I can probably be one of those people to benefit from doing that. But the act of getting from point A to point B is very hard.
Yes.
So I think that's where the self-compassion piece comes in too.
I also think like boundaries, whether it's setting boundaries for yourself or setting boundaries for the other person. Have you ever read Maybe You Should Talk to Someone?
Oh, yeah.
Oh my God, one of my favorite books. So the author has this quote where she talks about like boundaries do not mean rejection. Instead, boundaries are a bid for connection. She says that like instead of cutting off a relationship, it's like an act of wanting to make it work because you're expressing your needs. You're expressing like what an intention is for you. And sometimes that can be like really intimate. So when people are like, I needed to set a boundary with you, it's not because they like need space or separation from you. They're expressing a need. And like that's very authentic and raw. And for someone to do that, it shows growth and it also shows some mental health compassion for yourself.
Totally. We could probably talk about this in a whole other segment, but I think another thing to think about as well is how your partner or whoever it is in this situationship, relationship, whatever it is, listens to and receives that boundary or that ask or that sharing of this is something that I need, and to remind yourself that it's something that you need because you need it. You don't necessarily need to explain why.
Yes. Oh, that's so good. That is so good. And it's, I feel like, you know, we've talked about this, like mental health has become such a fad. People forget that like there is meaning and intention behind it. And I think when you get to a place in your relationship or when you feel comfortable or you feel like it's a conversation that you need to have, prioritizing your mental health can sometimes just be like communicating about your mental health with a partner or a friend or anyone. But like discussing your needs authentically and maybe not having a why behind them, but just saying, I do need this.
Yeah. And recognizing oftentimes that there could be some maybe like questioning back to like, why do you need that? Or really, like that seems like a lot, or that's a little extra. It's not extra. I mean, in some cases, if you want to pull back and like really reflect, I'm sure there are some on a smaller size or smaller percentage of just like, okay, maybe this is like totally really a lot. But I think oftentimes it's super attainable. And sometimes if people have a reaction, it could just be because they're not willing to do that.
Yeah. I think that, you know, there's always going to be like cultural and societal and social factors. There's stigma surrounding therapy and mental health and dating conversations. There's a difference in the way you might prioritize it from the person that you're dating. Maybe that's because of across different cultures or identities. But still, I think that like being able to normalize the conversations about therapy and your own emotional well-being is just going to make your partnership stronger. And if you feel like, again, those red flags are popping up, like sometimes that's just like a reminder. Maybe this isn't the person you need to be with.
Off the cuff, what are some tips in like breaching that conversation, maybe in an early stage relationship of just like, I mean, at the end of the day, we're using mental health as this term, right?
Yeah.
But it's also talking about your mental health is vulnerable.
Yeah.
So I think whether you're categorizing these conversations as talking about your mental health or you're just being vulnerable with this person is something to think about. Because I'm thinking about recent situations that I've been in and I'm like, oh, I definitely didn't use the word mental health, but I was super vulnerable about like maybe things in my past or maybe things that I'm nervous about in my future or maybe some insecurities that I have in this moment. That's vulnerable, and those are all a bunch of like vulnerable things to be talking about, but I think they're also connected to your mental health. So I think it's like, don't be afraid to recognize that like sometimes when this is happening or I get in this way of thinking, it makes me feel a little bit depressed or maybe a little bit anxious or just like, I don't know. I think sometimes it can be helpful to like draw those things, draw the connection between the, oh, I was just talking about kind of a stressful time that I had in a past time of my life. And I felt comfortable enough to share that with you, which I think is great. Awesome sign of a wonderful relationship and growing and changing and all of that stuff. But then also recognizing like, I think is having an impact on my mental health at times. And being able to like have a conversation and draw those connection in conversation.
And I think from the other end, if you don't feel comfortable to have those conversations, don't feel like you have to word vomit it out to reach like a level or a stage in a relationship for intimacy. You don't have to force that. And you don't have to force vulnerability when you don't feel safe enough. But sometimes I think where the comparison culture comes in.
Totally.
Where I'll talk to friends who've been on dates and they will talk about what they talked about on their date or like they got to this level or stage.
What is level?
I know. And they're like, oh, we talked about this or that. And I'm like, oh my God. Like
they got deep.
They got so deep. We talked about sports teams. Like, like how do you can't compare people's levels of intimacy and relationships and comfort to your own.
And I feel like I've definitely said this. I don't know on what series or what podcast, but I view this as my Bachelor moment.
Oh.
You know, like The Bachelorette and The Bachelor, ABC, love this show.
I've applied so many times.
Oh my gosh. Okay, we're just going to carry on. No, I'm joking. ABC, listen. No. I think that, and why do we feel like we need to share something or be vulnerable to get to a stage?
Yes.
Because of what we are taking in from the world.
Yes.
Movies, shows, whatever it may be. The Bachelor, if you are so blessed enough to get the one-on-one date,
yes,
you need to share
your most deepest, darkest secrets.
Like, and oftentimes it's a traumatic event.
Yes.
And it's just like, whoa. So I think that I've done a lot of like unlearning in my own therapy to be like, I don't need to tell this person that because I watched every season of The Bachelor since I was like 8. Like, I don't need to do that.
Yes. And it's like, I think about like even American Idol, like people would get more screen time if they had like a tragic backstory.
Exactly.
Like we have normalized giving the world and people pieces of ourselves to like achieve something in our relationships with them. And The Bachelor, that's so funny. It's so true. Every one-on-one, it's like, here's everything that's ever happened
Or it's
to
like
me.
they get a one-on-one later in the season.
Yeah.
And it's like, I wasn't able to open up quick enough.
Oh my
So
God.
like, we just need more time.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Like, and it's like, or it's like in the kind of preview or in like the interview, and they're like, well, this is my one time that I'm able to share this one thing. And if I don't, I'll be sent home.
But like,
he's asking for vulnerability. She's asking for vulnerability. And I need to give it.
yes. And then if you transfer that to like, this is my one time, this Hinge boy has asked me on a date. This is my one chance to really sell myself because after this, like he might ghost me or I might ghost him. And we go into things thinking about how I'm going to be perceived instead of, do I like this person? Do I want to spend time with this person? Like, what are they giving me? Like, why does it have to be a giving up of ourselves?
Yeah, 100%. Or like, do you like the conversation? Are you like intrigued by what they are saying? That too.
I don't know. It's so interesting. And I'm so glad we're doing this series because I think there's just so much to dive into and so many pieces of it. And I feel like one of the things that I really hope people take away from this episode, again, is like, we're not trying to give you the roadmap or the blueprint or what's really going to happen when you start dating and you share this or that.
It doesn't exist.
No.
No one has it.
Yes. This is more a form of validation to be like, everything that you have experienced or felt is valid. Like, there is no right or wrong or yes or no answer when it comes to dating. And you're allowed to feel what you feel and you're allowed to take it at your own pace and prioritize your mental health and however that looks for you.
And I love that we're able to put a therapist lens on this as well. And it's still so silly to like be myself as the therapist, putting my like 2 cents into it. But no, I think the last few points that you made are definitely just like highlighting that we are therapists and we want you to sort of be able to have this conversation in this area too. Also, with that being said, I know we're jumping around kind of all over the place, but we're showing up authentically on here and just sort of saying some of our experiences and things that are popping up for us in real time. And
and it's just relevant. Dating is relevant. Everyone talks about it.
I know, to like kind of not segue, but probably to go on a little bit of a tangent. But I've been seeing all of these TikToks and talk about conflicting. Maybe we can do a segment where
we
it's
just
like
pick up TikTok.
We pick like one TikTok and kind of just talk about it. I don't know. Let us know what you think. But it's this idea of, this is specifically in a hetero relationship, but women trying to de-center men and how difficult it has been for this one TikToker or someone sharing their opinion or their experience on TikTok about how hard it has been doing that, because she has then been like, I feel beyond disconnected from the rest of the world because I'm trying not to put energy. I'm trying to decenter men. I don't have as much to talk about with my girlfriends. I am scrolling past a ton of TikToks. I am doing all of this. So I don't know. That just sort of came up too. Like, it's also okay to not want to think about any of this stuff.
It's okay to walk away from it. Yeah, and take a break. I love saying I'm in my healing girl era. Anytime I'm like, well, I'm deleting Hinge. Like,
yeah, exactly. But then to point out, like, that's kind of that's less of a middle ground. And it's like I can only be in my healing era if I'm not unhinged.
Yeah.
Both
Definitely.
can be the same.
Yeah, something to think about. Well, we're so excited for this series, and we hope you'll join in next week.
See you later.